Okay, I am starting the recording. So welcome everyone to our third and final session of Jewish Insights from Fiddler on the Roof. And we'll see how the screen share goes. Whoops. So is the screen share working well for you?
Yes.
Somebody? Yeah, okay,
Yes.
thank you. So most of the slides, actually the slides I'm gonna show you right now are ones that I have shown you in the past. I got to keep an eye on the waiting room. So this makes my life a little confusing. So again, a word from my sponsor, my services as a community rabbi and making it possible for me not to have to charge anything is due to my support from the Jewish Federation of Ventura County, which in turn is provided to me by Joel and Barbara Aronson and their Affordable Living Choices Trust. So I appreciate it. And if you go to jewishventuracounty.org, you can make a contribution and they will appreciate that. Again, I think all of you probably know this by now. If you go to my website, you click on classes, right up on top is the description of this class about Fiddler on the Roof. And I have the PowerPoint slides. I will update them. But the main PowerPoint slides, which are the introduction to the class, are already on there. And then I also have the recording, the recording of our discussions as explained, actually as explained right here. I paused the recording during the film. I discovered that YouTube will not allow me to post clips from the film. So as far as questions go, you know how this works. Jot your questions down in the chat, and we will pause a few times for live questions and discussions. And then at the end, before I wrap up completely, I'm not rushing off anywhere. So if people want to keep discussing, we'll stay here. Okay, so I am gonna stop sharing. I am going to pause.
Get to start recording again.
Thank you, Ira. I just did. So thank you for the poll results, and I will share them and share my plans with you soon. We are going to continue with Fiddler on the Roof. The first cut is the dream, this wonderful dream that Tevye fakes having, because remember, Tevye has a problem. Tevye has agreed that his older daughter can marry Matel Zoil, and the daughter was pledged to marry the butcher. And Gold is very happy because the butcher is wealthy, and Tevye now has to somehow break this to Golda, belying the assumption that the man runs the show and he should care less what the woman thinks. He's very nervous about how to break it with Golda. So notice Tevye is having a discussion with God as the scene opens, a quiet discussion, and I will get back together with you after the clip. I'm continue the recording. Okay, so we've just watched the dream sequence. There's a lot going on there. I adore that sequence. Getting some interesting comments in the chat, which you can follow along. The Hafners, you have a hand up, I think. Yes? No, maybe not. So anyway, I want to make a number of observations, and we're going to have to maybe not have so much discussion during the class because there's a lot to cover. So one thing is the idea of dreams. So it is clear that Golda and Tevye, for that matter, all understand dreams as having significant meaning. And of course, that's very Jewish. You know, we have the story of Joseph's dreams. We have Jacob's dream of the ladder. Dreams are very significant in Jewish tradition and in psychology. And there's one thing which I probably mentioned before, but is kind of interesting. In the Talmud, it talks about dreams are equivalent to 1/60th of prophecy. And the 60th is because the Babylonian number system was based on 60. So it's like it's 1% of prophecy. They said that Shabbat is 1%, 1/60th of the world to come, a taste of the world to come, and that sleep is 1/60th of death. So, but this idea that there's something going on with dreams. The other thing, and of course I have a class, and many people are interested in it based on the poll, in the afterlife. And there is no question that there is a belief going on here in an afterlife. And I always mention this because I know so many Jews who are certain that Judaism does not hold with the idea of an afterlife. So while I certainly don't have the time to go into all the teachings, I'll just point out that Judaism has always taught there is something beyond this life. Having said that, we don't know the details. No one's come back to tell us, but there's lots of folk beliefs, and those folk beliefs actually influence our practice of saying Kaddish. And if you're really interested in that, you can binge watch my class on the afterlife. The other thing that Judaism talks about, which this dream epitomizes, is the idea that you can communicate between worlds. So it's one thing just to have a dream and maybe have an insight into what's going on in your subconscious, but it's another thing to have messages from the beyond about what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. There are stories in the Talmud which talk about this. So clearly in this context, Grandma Tzeitel is coming back, sending a message into this world to influence who the daughter is going to marry, who her great-granddaughter, who is named for her. That's a whole other issue, an Ashkenazi tradition of naming someone for deceased relatives. Sephardic world, you absolutely can name someone after a living relative. But clearly, Golda believes this. I mean, we know the dream is made up by Tevye, but there is no question that Golda understands that it's an actual message from the beyond. One thing which I really think is funny, I actually have a talk, I haven't put this out as a course, maybe I should, about Jewish superstitions. And, is one of those. The interesting thing about that is it may well have its origins in the New Testament. There's at least 2 occasions where Jesus heals by spitting and either mixing with mud or I think just directly spitting into the eyes, let's say, of a blind man. And the origin of that superstition may just precede the New Testament, but that may be how it enters Judaism. The one I really like to focus on is the meaning of the word Mazel Tov. I always say, I talk about this at every Jewish wedding because I had a wedding today. I have another wedding on Friday. And when the groom steps on the glass, everybody's supposed to shout Mazel Tov. I think we'll see that in the next scene. I always say, if you ask 100 Jews for the actual literal meaning of Mazel Tov, 99.5 will get it wrong. The word Mazal means stars, as in constellation of stars. As we'll see later with some of the imagery on the synagogue walls, which I've taken great effort to try and isolate, you will see that the Jews believed in astrology, and there are astrological floors, astrological symbols found in floors in ancient synagogues that are well over 1,000 years old. It's my own theory, I should try this on some scholar who really knows what they're talking about, that it may well be that the fact that we have 12 tribes and Jesus had 12 disciples is to line it up with the 12 signs of the zodiac. So Mazel Tov, when you wish somebody Mazel Tov, you're literally wishing them good signs, good stars, maybe sort of may the fate be aligned with you. And then I love the scene at the end, and somebody commented on that, this idea of a Yiddish cup. Tevye is very proud that he managed to figure out how to solve the terrible problem of getting Golda on his side. So before I jump to the next scene, anybody burning with a question or comment? Okay, good. So I'm going to pause the recording again. There's clearly a lot to digest there. I muted everyone, so some of you may have unmuted yourself would need to if you want to say something. So I want to talk both about the marriage and the marriage customs, and a number of people in chat raised some questions. So I just want to highlight some of the marriage customs. I'm really up to speed on this. As I mentioned earlier, I conducted a wedding today. I have another one on Friday. So there's the chuppah. Somebody mentioned there was not the bedekin. There's a ceremony where the groom gets to check to see if the bride is actually the right bride. And I, as a Reform rabbi and egalitarian, give the bride a chance to check to see if she's getting the right groom. And usually that's a lot of fun. There's a klezmer music. I once heard on one documentary program that one of the reasons for klezmer music, which something of course we didn't see, was to console the bride, because just before the wedding, her hair is being shaven off. A married woman in sort of Orthodox Ashkenazi tradition would not be able to show her own hair. So her hair would be shaved off and a wig would be put on her. There's the circling. Tradition is the bride circles the groom 7 times. Marriage is mentioned 7 times in the Hebrew Bible. One of the prophets talks about a bride making a protective circle for her husband. I always talk about the idea that just as God created the universe in 7 days, so too this couple is creating their own new universe in 7 circuits. And the egalitarian approach is she circles him 3 times, he circles her 3 times, and they do-si-do once. We did that today. And by the way, that is strictly an Ashkenazi tradition. If you go to Sephardic wedding, you will not, so let me just put it this way. Circling is not traditional in Sephardic weddings. 2 glasses of wine, because there are 2 ceremonies going on. There's kiddushin, which is betrothal or engagement, and there's nisuin, which is the wedding. In ancient times, the couple was betrothed for a year or more. I think you could legally betroth a young woman at about age 4, which would lock her into marriage with her, with the man. In fact, lock, and I mean not literally, that if they were to decide to not marry, even though they haven't been married, they would need a get, a Jewish divorce. Betrothal meant that if they were to have sexual relations with other people, that would be considered adultery. But because they're not yet married, they wouldn't be allowed to have sexual relations with each other. So as you can imagine, this created a certain amount of tension over the years. And so today, in a traditional Jewish wedding, this period of time lasts for about 5 or 10 minutes. Just covered a few things. Some of you may have noticed that he puts the wedding ring on her right finger. The rabbis believe there was a vein running from the right finger to the heart, and he recites the words prescribed in the Talmud. Behold, you are consecrated to me with this ring, according to the laws of Moses and Israel. The ring traditionally looks something like this. It's a plain ring, because he's acquiring her with the ketubah, but also with the value of the ring. And she has to know the value. So fancy rings are not part of Jewish tradition. And the witnesses later have to attest whether she agreed to the deal, accepted the ring in exchange for her being acquired, or she threw the ring back in his face. I noticed, and I haven't been able to find a tradition, maybe some of you are familiar with it, of having Havdalah candles as they walked. I suspect many of you noticed that it was Havdalah candles. Maybe it's underlying the idea that you don't get married on the Sabbath, so they're waiting for the sun to set, and good introduction to the song as well. There are 2 reasons why you don't get married on the Sabbath. One is silly, this is my opinion. One is silly and one is insulting. The silly reason for not getting married on the Sabbath is you're not supposed to combine joys. You're not supposed to combine the joy of a wedding with the joy of the Sabbath. The insulting reason for not getting married on the Sabbath is technically a wedding is a business transaction. The groom is acquiring the bride. So for those 2 reasons, I am very flexible with Sabbath weddings. The glass breaking I discussed. I thought it was interesting, although they get into an argument later. Laser Wolf is there. Everyone is in the village is there. And the fiddler is even there. I don't know if any of you noticed, he was up on the roof. The song Sunrise, Sunset, many of you commented on it. One of the interesting things in the next song, which will be Do You Love Me, which I adore these songs, is about love and sexuality in the second song from the parents' perspective. It's actually pretty unusual in a love story, in a story of marriage. Usually, you're getting the perspective of the newlyweds, but here the perspective is of the parents. Somebody commented that moving the ring for the third finger was acceptance of the marriage. I've never heard that. I won't say it's not true, but I've never heard that. Simply her agreeing to take the ring is the acceptance. You saw some peasanty looking peasants, and you'll see that lady again. And in one of the books I read on the film, they said it was really easy to hire extras for this film, that everybody in Yugoslavia in this area looked like what you would expect them to look like, from 100 years ago. Let's see. You saw the whole business was dancing with a woman, and the rabbi solving the problem by dancing with a kerchief. You will see dancing with a kerchief all the time at bar mitzvahs, at weddings. The reason is so a man and woman can dance together without touching each other. I won't talk so much about the pogrom unless there's a lot of interest, but I read also somewhere in one of the books that the wedding scene with the pogrom with feathers flying everywhere was actually inspired by a story told on a kibbutz by an elderly couple talking about their actual history of their childhood in the Ukraine. And the other thing I'll point out and then ask if there's quick comments is the change in mood from abject joy to abject sorrow is, in my sense, very Jewish. If you've ever been in Israel on Yom HaZikaron, which is Memorial Day, but in Israel, Memorial Day is a serious Memorial Day. Namely, every family has lost children in wars. So the mood is incredibly somber and sad. And it's the day before Yom HaAtzmaut, which is Independence Day. And literally at sunset, the nation changes as dramatically in the direction of happiness, but as dramatically as what we saw, from abject sadness to crazy, insane joy on Israeli Independence Day. So let's see, I see Jay and Richard, you have your hand up. So Richard and then Jay.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi. If I was unmuted when I should not have been unmuted, so I apologize for that. If prior to this, we were making a little noise. I wanted to comment on Sunrise, Sunset, which I think is maybe the most emotional moment ever that I can recall. Today happens to be my older son's 39th birthday. He's a fantastic guy. He's just such a great guy. But that song I was crying during that song. And I can't think of another song really in the history of moviedom that could elicit, and I think it's probably universal, that everybody has that feeling about that song. And as Rabbi, you just observed, the range of emotional feeling in that 15-minute stretch, whatever it was, of video, spans the entire gamut. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's genius. It's out of this world.
And I would also say it reflects what it's like being a Jew, that there are times of fantastic joy and pride, and there are times of utter dismay.
More
Jay.
than just being a Jew, I think humanity. I think
yes,
everybody can relate to that.
Yes. Jay.
Rabbi Lotker.
Hold on a second, Miriam. Hold on. Jay, go
right.
ahead.
Having been to a couple of weddings like that, and I've often wondered but never asked the question, why do the men sit on one side, the women on another, and why do not the man and the woman, why do not men touch a woman when they're dancing?
It's laws of modesty. There's nothing more complex than that.
Where is that written?
It's probably written in the It's not
I
Torah.
hate to ask these tough questions.
I'm sorry?
I hate to ask these tough questions.
No, they're not tough questions. Most fundamentalist religions, most fundamentalist approaches to religion have extreme rules about modesty. And I would say you don't see these extreme rules in practice in the Sephardic world. You do see it in the Ashkenazi world.
Yeah.
And I think, I can't remember whether I talked about this Monday night. In the Ashkenazi world, Ashkenazim were Jews that lived in Christian nations. The Christians had a theological reason to keep Jews isolated, and that's where the ghettos start. Once you're in a ghetto, there's a lot of inward focus, and people become more and more focused on themselves, and these kinds of rules develop. The Sephardic world were Jews living in Muslim lands where there was much more interaction, because the Muslims did not have the same theological chip on their shoulder that the Christians had. So the Jews living in Muslim lands, some are very strict, some are not so strict, but there is not as much pressure. And I'll add one more comment at the risk of going on too long. In the recent last 100 to 200 years, there's also another change going on in Judaism. And that change is, longer, 500 years ago, you had strict rabbis, you had liberal rabbis, you had movements all over the place, and they would iron out the differences and make the rules. These days, the liberal rabbis, who are not so strict, leave orthodoxy, and they go to conservative Judaism, they go to Reform Judaism, leaving behind in the Orthodox world very, very strict tendencies. So let me move on, because I really have a lot to cover. Miriam, you were going to say something.
I don't know if I missed it, but did you talk about the breaking of the glass? The man has to, well, but
go ahead.
Okay, I'm reading this book. It's called Born to Kvetch. Have you heard of it?
No.
It's really good. And in this book, I believe that it said that we break the glass because we're not supposed to be so happy. There's still things to be done, and about the temple.
Yes, let me address it. Let me address it. The origin is probably pre-Judaic. It probably stems from pagan times, when people thought that evil spirits lurked during happy times, so you made a loud noise, knock wood, to frighten them away. The rabbis Judaicized it by saying it's symbolic of the fact that the temple is still in ruins, the world is broken, and we shouldn't, our time of maximum enjoyment should be tempered by breaking something precious.
Okay.
Let's see, Jan, you have something. You need to unmute, Jan. Jan, you still need to unmute. Okay, well, Jan is finding her unmute button. Bryce.
My question is, when did the Muslim world become so anti-Jewish, if, as you historically speak, that the Muslim world was a lot more tolerant?
So what I would say is, officially, Islam is tolerant of anyone or any nation that is willing to submit to Islam. With the arrival of Zionism, you had Jews living in Muslim lands that weren't willing to submit to the rule of Islam. And I would say it's fairly recent that you have, and I would say in the last 100 years, and I'm sure there are examples that go back more than that, but certainly in Spain and in those times, Jews and Muslims got along much better than they do now, and than Jews and Christians did. Jan, you are unmuted.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was touching the wrong microphone. Anyway, back to the wedding, when it's supposed to be the betrothal and the wedding on the glasses of wine. When we got married, I really loved what our rabbi did. He said, one is the cup of joys and one is the cup of sorrows, and you both drink from both and never know which is which. And I just really
hold on a second. Which two cups? Like the two?
During the wedding ceremony, the 2 cups of wine. He said one was the cup of joys and one was the cup of sorrows, and we both drank from both.
Never heard that. That's completely inconsistent with my approach to a wedding. One and absolutely, one represents engagement, and one represents the marriage. Okay, I want to jump back into The song, and a song I just adore, which is Sunrise, Sunset. More changes. Again, the underlying message of this story is changing with the times. There's a lot of underlying sexuality in this song. You know, watch when Golda says 25 years my bed is his, he's saying shh. Let's see what else. And the whole idea of love as a possibility is radical. So I'll
This
say
is Do You Love Me, not Sunrise, Sunset.
I'm talking
right?
about Do You Love Me? Yes.
Right, you said Sunrise, Sunset.
Oh, sorry. So anyway, let's listen to the music, and I love that song. So I talked about a little bit. The lyricist Harnick said when he got the inspiration for writing this song, he said it struck him that it would be very funny if there was a song with Tevye saying to Goldie, "Do you love me?" and her looking at him as though he's out of his mind and saying, "Do I what?" He had a very difficult time, the lyricist, coming up with lyrics. There's a discussion in one of the books of him walking around Manhattan, you know, probably with a notebook, trying to come up with lyrics and almost getting hit by a car. When he finally wrote it and he first saw it on stage in the show, he was sobbing and crying, the lyricist, so loudly that he had to leave the theater. And he thought to himself, oh my God, I've written what I wished the relationship was between my own parents who fought so much. So that I thought that was fascinating. Jan, you have your hand up.
No. Oh, she's muted.
Maybe she had it.
There it
from
goes.
before.
Okay, she's good.
Sorry, it was still up from before.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Any other thoughts or comments? I'm looking for people physically raising hands. Okay, no, good. We can go on. The next, so we're gonna see the introduction to the song Anatevka. Anatevka is a beautiful song about leaving, but I'm not gonna play the whole song for purposes of time.